We're rolling. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Anyway, roll in.
Yeah.
Grant, Elrina, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you guys doing?
Great.
Thank
Really
you.
excited to be here.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
we...
The studio is amazing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Go on, give us a
So
bit
good.
more credit on
Yeah,
that, because
yeah.
that was
And I love
Brilliant.
Tenzing. What a great drink.
tensing. Yeah, just I'm gonna crack it open. I've already cracked it.
do it.
Oh, bit of ASMR.
Do the sound effect.
Guys, yeah, thanks for coming down. I know, well, to give everyone a bit of context, we're obviously friends. You live right near us, and I like to call you guys the wizards on my wizards. Both of you are amazing, and you've helped me with a lot of my, I say, health problems. I wouldn't say problems, but you've definitely helped me through some really difficult situations, whether it's to do with that leg thing or my ankle or whatever it is. It seems to be moving around, this kind of pain that I'm getting, but we're getting somewhere. And I wanted to get you down to talk about the importance of, for me, this is what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about the importance of preventative as opposed to talking about something once you're sick. It's like healthcare and sick care and all those sort of things, which I've now realised on this journey from the last 4 or 5 years, transitioning from a very unhealthy lifestyle, which we've talked about, and you know my background of, you know, not eating well, not exercising, being in a lot of pain, to now going down this new route where I'm still on this journey, but much more aware of my body and how it works, and again trying to find out what's next and trying to heal. So to give a bit of context for the listeners, though, do you want to just introduce yourselves and just give a little bit of background information about who you are and what you do? Who wants to go first?
Oh, I'll go first.
Ladies
then.
first.
Um,
Gentlemen.
So I'm Elrina, and I've started life as a physiotherapist. And I think because of my drive to learn more, it's the real passion for me. I've then started studying acupuncture, which opens up a whole different field of looking at health in a different way, and also in a more preventative way. And then through my own health challenges, found nutrition and the importance of lifestyle. Then I went and did a qualification in lifestyle medicine, which is pretty much the way my practice goes now. Most of what I do is health coaching alongside doing physiotherapy or acupuncture treatment. But that kind of health coaching is the thing that will keep people well, because if the foundations aren't there, no amount of treatment is actually going to fix it. Whether it's a medication or physiotherapy or acupuncture, you have to go and prevent things before they happen, or at least reduce the amount of inflammation in your body. So that's very much my focus with clients now, which is also why we're looking at running retreats. So it's more preventative care, education. And I'd probably say in one sentence, what I'm trying to do is to empower people with the knowledge that they can make better choices. So in medicine, we talk about informed consent, but if you're living a poor lifestyle and you don't even know that, you are consenting to illness without being informed. So I think our responsibility as healthcare practitioners is to make sure that people are giving informed consent of what they're going to get later on. So once you know better, you do better. And that's kind of where I'm sitting in the kind of healthcare space for myself and also for my clients.
Amazing.
Awesome. My name's Grant. Ever since I was about 6 years old, I knew I wanted to be some sort of health provider. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and I was sort of going down that route. And then I just realized that it wasn't really the lifestyle for me. I didn't really want to be in medicine. So then I was looking at physiotherapy because I was always really active. So the sports injury side of things really did sort of light me up. And then it was a very good friend of mine who said, "Why do you want to be a physiotherapist?" And I told him, and he was like, "Why don't you be a chiropractor?" And I was like, "I don't even know what that is," you know. So he explained it to me, and I went and watched some guys work, and I was just like, "Yeah, this is pretty cool." So I applied and I got in, and yeah, I'm now a chiropractor. I've been practicing for about 21 years, and so it almost feels like chiropractic sort of chose me, not the other way around. And I'm really grateful. I mean, Elrina's a physiotherapist, and you know, we have a lot of commonalities, but yeah, I just love what I do. And then my sort of evolution of that, you know, you start off with the pain model and trying to help people with back pain, neck pain, sports injuries, headaches, whatever it is. But it's now evolved much more into sort of a lifestyle medicine sort of approach. You know, as you know, our practice has everybody under one roof. We've got personal trainers, we've got massage therapists, we do nutrition, we do blood tests. We really try and be a solution to healthcare without having to use surgery and drugs. That's sort of our mission is to try and again empower people to know how to be healthy and move on. So that's sort of my evolution, and now we are at this place where we are practitioners, but we're really also health coaches as well, and just trying to teach people about how to be healthy and get the best out of their lives and make sure that their health span is as long as their lifespan, because that's so important. You don't want to live to 90 but only be well until you're 60. Nobody wants that. So you want to try and get that number as close together as possible, health span and lifespan.
Yeah,
that's our mission.
Yeah, that's wicked. You are. I would say you're wizards, though, right? You guys. I honestly will. I'm going to call you wizards forever, because there's some of the things that I've experienced in your practice. Whether the first session has been with you, Grant, and you've done a few sessions, and you've gone, actually, we need Elrina to look at this, and then it's just this synchronicity between you guys, and the whole practice is just incredible to see it in action. And sometimes I'll come out there and I'll call Eleanor and I'll go, you'll never fucking guess what just happened. and that's the reason I want you guys to come down today to speak about these things, because I actually said something in a session last week when we were looking at my ankle, Elrina, if you remember, and I said something about knowledge is power, and what was the thing you said?
Knowledge is only power when it's applied.
Yes.
So I've had a patient come in, and many patients, but a particular thing that came to mind where this lady keeps coming in, she's got pain in her shoulder, always has pain when she's gardening, she's an elderly lady, and the amount of times I've given her rehab, all she needs to do is the rehab, but she wants to come in, bit of manual therapy, that's fine. But then she says to me, oh, are these the exercises you meant? Now, I've told her these exercises for 5, 8, 10 years, right? And I said, yes, those are the exercises. Are you doing them? Your shoulder is not going to get better just because you know the exercises. They're only going to get better when you actually go and apply it. So, knowledge is only power. Because most of us know how to eat, right? If you don't have some clue of how to eat fairly well, I don't know what rock you've been hiding under. It's not that hard. It's applying that knowledge in a way that is, conducive to a good, fun, happy life as well.
Yeah, we're not starved of information, right? I mean, everybody's got a smartphone. You can Google anything, or now speak to some sort of AI, and it could give you all the information and all the research that you want. But it's actually taking that step to actually applying that. And sometimes you need a coach. Sometimes you need an accountability partner. You need a best mate or whatever, or some sort of metric where you go, hang on a second, my bloods are completely out of whack here. I'm going to be like my dad and die at 53. So there needs to be something like that, just to push that, that knowledge, but then into application can be the bridge, and that's kind of where we come from.
And I've experienced this firsthand, because we went through this running thing last March. I was going to run the marathon. I went to see Grant. Said, you need to come see Elrina, because she just needs to have a look at you and do some certain things. And Elrina said to me, basically, you cannot run. What she said to me is, I've been training for this marathon. Obviously, you start to build your distance up. And as I was building distance up, I was getting really excited. I was like, 15, 20, 25K, 28K. And then I hit 20K on the next one. And I was like, I have to stop this pain. And then it was 16K. I had to stop. To the point where it was like 4K and I had to stop. So anyway, I went in to see Elrina, and Elrina got me to do these exercises. And after I'd done the exercises, I didn't know what they were. She said, the test I just give you was for a woman who's just had a baby, who's trying to get back into exercise, and you just completely flatline failed that test. She said,
it's not funny, really.
Yeah, it is, but it was.
It's not funny when it's your knee, though. It's not funny when it's your body.
Completely, but this pain was excruciating, and I was 5 days, it was like maybe 9 days out from the marathon at this stage, and I couldn't run 4 or 5K. And you did say, you can run it if you want, but I can't guarantee you're not going to cause long-term damage, because we still weren't really sure what was going on. But what you did say is you've got weakness in your hips, and you need to work on this weakness, because I was doing like one-legged squats, and my knee was buckled in. It was clear to Elrina, not to me, I don't have a fucking clue, but it was clear to Elrina that I was having problems with my hips, and that's where the weakness was. Anyway, Elrina gave me 4 exercises for rehab, okay? And I was like, all right, I'll do them. And I didn't do them.
Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power, yeah. But
applied knowledge is
applied knowledge is power. So anyway, this went on and on and on. And I tried to run a little bit, it hurt. I tried to run a little bit, it hurt. Anyway, in December, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do these exercises, right? We'll see what happens. The reason I didn't do them is because rehab can be boring, right?
Boring, and it takes
Can be.
time.
It is boring.
It is very boring.
It's totally boring.
It's
horrible.
not.
There's nothing sexy about it.
There's nothing sexy about the exercise I was given. They took a long time. I said to Grant, I came to see you for an alignment, and you went, why do you just break it down? Instead of doing all of them and it takes 40 minutes, why don't you just do 10 minutes? I was like, all right, then I'll do this 10 minutes. And after a month or 2 months, like by January, February, I was running again. And I was doing 10, 15K. But then the pains are coming back. But now we're figuring out it's gone somewhere else and we're working on the ankle. But what I'm saying is, what you just said there about applied knowledge is so true, because I knew these exercises should have been done for 9 months before, but I just chose not to do them. And that was my decision. But what I'm also trying to say is, even though we have figured out that there is weakness in the hips and that's now getting better, there's still something else wrong, but we're figuring it out. It's almost like a puzzle.
Yeah,
It feels like a puzzle.
It's like an onion.
It's
You're like peeling
detective
layers.
work. You know, it's detective work. And I think, as we say, we peel back those layers of the onion, and the hip shows up first. And then, you know, then you go, okay, if I do that, then, oh, now the ankle shows up, or whatever else shows up. So it is literally like being a detective and putting the pieces together.
Yeah.
And we're probably all old enough to remember, you know, the cassette tape, you know, like rewinding the tape. And that's often how it is with injuries. You almost go back in time sometimes, especially if it's a chronic injury. So the most likely scenario is the first injury, and I think you'll probably back us up on that, was the ankle.
Yeah, years ago.
And then it became some sort of distortion pattern in that leg not really working, and then it showed up in the hip being dysfunctional. And the knee, if you're talking about a knee, if we just go into a little bit of mechanics here, your ankles and foot's a really complicated mechanism. It can move in all directions, you know. And the hips are ball and socket, can pretty much do anything. The knee's right in the middle, does nothing except go backward and forward, you know. So this is the guy that always shows up, well, not always, but often will show up first, because this is a hinge between two pivots. So if there's any dysfunction in this whole mechanical chain, usually the knee's the first thing to go.
I always say it's like
seeing now.
divorcing parents. You know, you've got the mother and father, ankle and hip, and then the poor child is the one in the middle. That's the knee. If the knee shows up, either the mother and the father are unhappy.
That's so true. That's actually my experience, both the ankle and the hip. And it was one, now that's strengthened, now the ankle's showing, and it's almost just figuring out what's next and what's going to happen now.
No, there's nothing next. That's it, mate.
No.
Well, I'll have to see you guys again.
The next is running for 24 hours or whatever you really freaking want to do. Why, mate? Why? But anyway, that's your journey.
But even taking it back a step to the sessions when I first started seeing you, Grant, because I was having problems with, I can't remember what it was. It might be I can't remember. It was most like my
low
back
pain, middle back pain. There was quite a few things going on.
Yeah, and it was either temple or it was Drew was like, you need to go and see Grant. I was like, all right, I will. I've got to go and see Grant. And you were in my fund, so I knew who you were, but I hadn't come to see you. And I kept saying at the gym, and Temple was like, just go and see Grant. Just go and fucking see Grant. So I ended up buckling.
And Temple is a person, not a place of worship, right?
Yeah.
Let's not confuse the
Dan
listeners.
Temple, big up Dan.
The Temple was speaking.
The Temple was speaking, and I actually listened this time, and I was blown away by the. It's a combination of the knowledge that you had about certain things you were asking me to do. You know, the pull my arm forward, you switch my spine. Then we'll crack this. We'll crack something up here, and then a muscle that wasn't firing that was causing me a lot of pain would just instantly not hurt. It was something that was hurting for like 4 months. You would find this point, you crack it, and you go, okay, you do this tap, okay, back up, right, pull your leg up, and I'll go, I couldn't even do this before, and now I'm doing this without any pain. And those sort of things, you come out of those rooms and you're like, how did he do that? And this is where I get this wizard thing, and I'm not just taking the mick, it feels like magic a lot of the time. And I know it doesn't always last, because there's obviously muscles that weren't working in that area, and you've reactivated that muscle and it needs work. It needs rehab.
Rehab comes in.
The rehab comes in, and that's where you've got to do the rehab in order to, fix those kind of like connections. But have you done any chiropractic stuff before?
I did it the very first time I ever did it, I was in Thailand with Mish in 2016, getting back on the boat to leave. We'd just done a retreat at a place called the Sanctuary. We'd done a fast and a colonic for like 5-6 days, and we was there for 2 weeks. And I was getting on the boat to take us back from Koh Phangan to Koh Samui to get the flight home. And I was waving at the people as we were leaving, going, yeah, and I had my rucksack on my back with all my laptop. And I twisted, and the weight pulled me back, and I went to grab the boat, and my laptop dipped in the sea, and I was thinking, oh, my MacBook's gonna get damaged. And I pulled myself up, and I felt this click, but I didn't think anything of it. And then a few days later, I had really bad pain here in my chest. And my wife, Miss, she was visiting the chiropractor and she went, you should go and see him. And I was like, what's a chiropractor? Similar to Grant's story in the beginning, like, what is it even is that? I was like, what is it? She went, he'll sort it out. So I went in to see him and he knew I climbed mountains, like, you know, climbing Ben Nevis and all the rest of it. And he said, come in, tell me about the mountains that you climb, because I climb mountains. And he had pictures of mountains all over his wall. And he went, sit in the seat here. He said, we'll just have a look around. And he just went boosh and cracked my back. And I heard it all crack all the way down and fixed the problem.
Beautiful.
So that was my very first experience of going to a chiropractor, and it was almost like I didn't even have to think about doing it. Miss just said, oh, come in and, you know, speak to you, and just went and fixed the problem. So yeah, that's the only issue I've ever had where I've needed to go and see somebody for it.
Aren't you lucky?
Yeah, very lucky.
Yeah, that's
Very lucky, because I've done yoga for quite a period of time in my life, and I've never really had injuries. But that one in particular, yeah, was a bad one. But what I was going to add to and just say as well, what you was talking about before, Grant, you said about the information that we all have available, which got me thinking that predominantly sometimes now we can almost say that we're in a bit of an information overload for certain people, and for people listening, when it comes to diet in particular, and I've come across it with previously in my office in Manchester, there's a lot of information available for people out there, but getting that information, it can be a bit of a minefield, because there's a lot of corporations that promote foods that on the surface they're marketing them as healthy. But actually when you do your homework and you realise they're actually not actually very healthy for people. So when people come in to get advice from you, and particularly when you guys talk about nutrition and the benefits, obviously, that we all know that can impact the body, how do you get people for it to be tangible for them, and what's the best route for them to go and get good nutritional starting base point for them to make that change for themselves?
Okay, so we can definitely both answer this, but I think I'll just start off by saying, number one, any change needs to be sustainable. You can't, and in order for it to be a healthy choice, anybody can lose weight. So, you know, you see it all the time with people about to get married, whether they males or females, you know, they will, you know, get into whatever size or get like buff or you know, get into a certain dress size, whatever. And starve themselves and train really hard, and then as soon as they've had that day, they sort of just put on the weight, and then usually and then some. So number one, it needs to be sustainable. So it's got to be something that you can look at that and go, okay, fine. It can't be a diet. Okay, so the first three letters of diet is die. You know, you can't kill yourself to do this stuff, right? You know, go back to the first point. So you have to really understand what is good nutrition. What, you know, if you look at a plate, is this a good plate or is this a bad plate? So that's sort of what I do with my nutrition clients. I go, okay, so you need to be able to look at it and go, okay, this is a good plate, this is a bad plate. And it's simple things like, you know, color. You know, is it primarily beige, or there's a whole bunch of color on this, you know? You can use the hand as quite a good little tool as well. So it's like a thumb full of fat. It's a palm size of lean protein. It's a fistful of, sometimes even two fistfuls of vegetables, you know? So, and really pulling back on the starchy vegetables. So like your potatoes, again, potato, what color is it? It's sort of whitey beige, you know, so it's probably full of sugar. Yes, it is. So then you want to look at something that's maybe a similar thing, which is a little bit more bright. So you're looking at sweet potatoes, you're looking at butternuts, you know, carrots. Those can be your more starchy sides of things. And then you should just have really a whole bunch of greens. So and with every single meal, you should have starch, you should have carbohydrates, you should have protein, and you should have fat. If you don't have those three macros, then it's not a meal, it's a snack. So and we should be eating meals throughout the day. So that's the sort of main thing that we look at, just to make it easy. And with that, you don't have to go into MyFitnessPal and like scan every single thing that you do and be really meticulous and weigh things. At some points, you might need to do a little bit of that, but primarily it's just about, okay, is this a healthy plate or is this not a healthy plate? So that's the main stuff, which is just like, you know, and it has to be real food, you know, as well. You want to be going down the produce aisle and buying your food, not going down the frozen food aisle or the things that have got like packages, and you look at the amount of ingredients and there's like a freaking 3 paragraphs of ingredients, you know.
Yeah.
You want to basically get, okay, this is a carrot, this is probably food, you know, that kind of thing.
Whole foods.
Yeah.
Whole
Yeah.
foods,
Whole foods.
produce aisle, you know, you go down
Yeah.
the vegetables and the meats and the and all that sort of thing. So that's the main stuff, you know. And there's no fad about there. There's nothing like that. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff. But anyway.
Bear Chat is powered by Tenzing Natural Energy, as pure as your morning coffee, but without the jitters.
Whether it's the early morning grind, the afternoon slump, or the pre-workout that you need for that session, we've got you covered. It's 100% plant energy, no added sugar, and definitely no crash. Just clean, natural energy to keep you going.
And because we love you, anyone listening to this show gets 30% off. So quote BEAR30 to get your boost.
One of the things I'd say to my clients is, would your grandmother recognize this as food? Right? Because
That's really good.
if it's food, it's food. If it's something else, you can't out-supplement a bad diet. And if we start thinking about foods that are being sold as healthy, they're often been sitting more in the kind of supplement side of things. Now, I have no problem taking supplements. I take loads myself, but on top of a very healthy diet. So I think that's the key thing to recognize, that you're not going to go fix bad nutrition by having a particular food that your grandmother wouldn't have recognized. The basis of things, you always think of these things as pyramids, right? The bottom things have to be the basis, the good, solid, nutrient-dense foods. And there's a great scale. If you're not sure of how dense your food is, it's called the Andi scale, ANDI. Aggregate Nutrient Density Index, and kale is 1,000, and a slice of white bread is like a 3.
Wow.
Okay, so it gives you an idea. If you're in a restaurant and you have to make a choice, and you have that Andi scale in the back of your head, you kind of make slightly different choices, right? Because you could choose a plate of fries and a burger, or you could have a naked burger with some extra salad. Do you know?
Yeah.
Or extra vegetables, or your Thai curry, just ask for extra vegetables, leave the rice. So if it's beige, I tend not to eat it. The more colored, dense food is, the higher it is in phytonutrients. So when you're shopping as well, just go for the darkest food you can find, the darkest berries you can find, because the more color there is, the more nutrient density there is. Now, if you want to start packing your diet full of nutrients, which is what we're trying to do here, you want fuel, right, that's going to really sit in your cells, you want to make sure that for the time you have to eat every day, most of us are time poor, right? You want to make sure that every single meal packs a punch. So if you drove a Ferrari and you know that the only car you're ever going to have is this Ferrari, would you be putting the best possible fuel into it, or would you be just driving past the nearest garage and fueling up with whatever cheap crap they've got there because it's convenient, right? Or would you start putting diesel into a petrol car? So if you only have this one car, you've only got this one Ferrari. Now, I'm not very lucky. I got a Skoda, or, I don't know, something else. No offense, Skoda. But, I'm just
sure they're watching.
I'm sure they are. I've had to marry a mechanic. So maybe it's a Fiat. Let's just insult them all, shall we? But if you've been lucky enough to be born with a healthy, robust body that runs in a great way, the amount of abuse that you can put that Ferrari through is absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
But if we think of posture, that's your alignment of your wheels, right? Making sure your oil's in there, that's your supplement. But fuel is your most important thing. Water, how important? How many cars run without fuel and water? Your oil changes go every now and again. Those are your extra little bits, your supplements. But you start putting crap in the tank, not washing it, wheel alignments out, and then you go into the garage going, oh, this doesn't feel very nice, and you want to complain about the car not running well, but you didn't take care of it. And I'm a huge fan, and probably overly so, of personal responsibility when it comes to your health, because we want to blame the NHS, we want to blame, and the NHS is such a misnomer, because why we call it a health service is beyond me. It's a disease service. Yeah. That's what it does. And they wait for you to get sick before they can do anything about it, right? So you have to educate yourself. You have to, empower yourself. You have to take action with all these things. And the only way to do that really is to understand why. Why would you do it? Why would you want to be healthy? What's the point of eating a healthier meal? Now, I was brought to that really early on because I got a disease. So from a young age, I had to start thinking about how can I be healthier? Whereas a lot of us don't get that feedback as early on. And when the feedback starts coming at the 50s and the 60s, when the blood tests show up and suddenly your blood pressure's high and your cholesterol's showing up and, all the metabolic stuff, the tires around the waist, then you've already so far along that path of ill health and bad habits that are so much harder to change. It doesn't mean the responsibility is off you, even more so, but the sooner you take action, the better.
Yeah. I got, when you talk about MyFitnessPal, I kind of got obsessed with that. It was helpful, and it was, but I mean, the motive was to get it was like to get as shredded as possible. It wasn't like to get healthy. In fact, I was probably the most unhealthy trying to do that.
Yeah.
measuring the amount of milk I was putting in coffee, and like every single 3 calories was in that MyFitnessPal.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's actually a bad idea if you do it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
But if you're doing it for every single thing, it's consuming.
An obsession is
Completely.
never healthy. Is it?
No, any obsession.
But it's a tool, right?
It is a
and
tool.
it's like any tool. If you use it well,
Yeah.
it can be. If you need that education and you know no idea if this is a good or bad thing, that's a great tool to
Yeah,
use,
I
right?
think using because literally we pretty much eat similar stuff week in, week out, kind of. You know, we
Yeah.
can have our favorite meals and maybe have like, I don't know, maybe 10 different dinners that we're going to have, and like 4 or 5 different breakfasts.
Yeah.
So I think understanding a few things about the macros, I think, is good, because then once you get the trends, you just, you know, you can use it, then you can put the app away, you know. But I think if you are sort of like obsessing about everything and scanning every single QR code and not QR code, barcode,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all sorts of things, and I think that can be the dark side of it.
It's very dark, and it gets like, even when I was going for meals, Eleanor was like, put your fucking phone away. Don't, like, I was trying to figure out how much meat was on this plate and how many chips I've got and like everything. And it's like, it just consumes your life. What I want to also ask you is about the process that I went through, and also another family member who's just gone through this with you in your practice, which is kind of the full, how do you call it? Not an MOT. So when you come in, it's like an MOT. What do you got? What do you call it?
It is. I mean, so the product that we provide is called the Wellness Score.
The Wellness Score, yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, what that is a report card of all the tests that we do. So
Yep.
so the way that a patient will come in is that they usually have some sort of ailment. It might be an injury, or it might be a desire to just perform better, or whatever it is. And we do a whole battery of tests. So it starts off with history, and it's quite sort of like coaching led kind of history. We want to find out what are your goals? You know, what do you actually want? Like, what is this? Whatever's going on, your challenge, what is it stopping you from doing or enjoying? You know, and how would life be better if this was gone? So we kind of use that sort of stuff, and we get a whole bunch of metrics and understanding, so that when we make the recommendations, it's based upon what the patient wants and not what we think the patient needs. Okay, so that's with the starting point, and then there's a subjective questionnaire, which is like a sort of broad strokes health questionnaire, which again is a scoreable sort of situation, and then we do things like we take digital photographs of the person's posture. We look at their functional movement. So looking at like how they squat, how they lunge, how they stand on one leg, whether they can do like a pass over with a pole in their arms, straight leg raise, lying on their back. So all of these metrics just to see flexibility and strength and stability. We do some nerve scans, which is particularly a chiropractic thing. They electrical nerve scans that are computer driven. So we're looking at electromyograph, and we're looking at thermal scans. We also do an HRV as well, heart rate variability scan as well, just to see what state the autonomic nervous system is. We do an in-body scan as well. In-body is it's a body composition test, essentially. There's a few of these on the market, but the in-body seems to be one of the sort of top products out there, and that looks at like your muscle mass, your fat, your visceral fat, which is one of the things that I really love about this. It actually tells you what your actual score of your visceral fat is, and visceral fat is like the main thing that really makes us sick long term.
You tell people what visceral fat is if they don't know.
So you get 2 types of fat. You get the sort of subcutaneous fat, which is the stuff that's unsightly, might give you a little bit of cellulite and make you wobble a little bit. But to be honest, that's not really going to kill you. Okay, it just doesn't look great. But then you get people that actually have no subcutaneous fat. I think there's a lot of sort of males that I can think of, particularly in South Africa. I don't know why, but I think it's because of just the diet and that sort of thing. They are like all skinny through here, and they've got these massive big bellies, and they're like
beer.
rock hard. Well, it is. It's beer and
Yeah.
meat and fat, right?
Yeah.
And stress and all these sorts of things.
lot of stress.
And that's literally just fat that's just sitting around their organs.
Yeah.
And the thing with visceral fat is it's been shown to increase your inflammation, and no chronic disease process happens without inflammation starting off. Okay, and actually aging process itself, they call it inflammaging. Like inflammation and aging are so connected. So it predisposes you particularly to type 2 diabetes, which is like massive at the moment, just getting worse and worse and worse. Cardiovascular disease and certain types of cancer. So all the main 3 big killers, except for dementia, that's the 4 horsemen are those. And I'm sure dementia is also a part of inflammatory cycle as well.
Huge.
hugely. So visceral fat gives us a real snapshot in terms of, okay, so what are your risk factors for these big things? So that's what visceral fat is. So that's one of the main things we do. And then I'll muscle test people. I'll check the health of their spine in terms of like palpating. And then we take all of that and we create, like I said, a report card which is color coded, and the person will get a score from that. And if I feel that this person, blood test as well, I get not blood test, blood pressure as well is also an important thing, and height weight ratio as well. That's waist height ratio. Again, that's a really good clinical test in terms of what your visceral fat is, just by using a tape measure. But it's also clinically relevant for cardiovascular disease. So yeah, there's all references for this as well. So once we've got all that, then we can make the recommendations in terms of, okay, this is where we should go with, what your goals are, and we can sort of guide the person over there. And again, like I said, if there's other risk factors that we sort of worried about, then we'll take blood tests, and the blood test can also go into the wellness score as well. And the bloods that we do, just as a basic panel, we're looking at kidney and liver function, and then we're again looking at something called metabolic syndrome. I don't know if you guys have heard of metabolic syndrome, but it's a combination of cardiovascular disease risk and type 2 diabetes risk. And so we're looking at your CRP, which is your main inflammation marker. We look at vitamin D because it's so important for inflammation, etc. We look at your fasting glucose levels. We look at your HbA1c, which is an indication of how much uncontrolled sugar you've had in your blood for the last 90 days, because that's how long a red blood cell hangs around. So they basically look at how much sugar is actually in the red blood cell. So that's a really, really sensitive marker.
And sugar is a very inflammatory, is unstable the right word? Within the cells, it causes a lot of damage.
It's like even
natural sugars as well.
Sugar is sugar.
Sugar is sugar.
So literally, if you have honey or you have a tablespoon of sugar, if there's the same amount of glucose in it, it doesn't matter. There may be some extra micronutrients, that kind of stuff that go in, and phytonutrients and things like that. But in terms of what it actually does to your insulin system, there's no difference. It basically it's sugar.
Metabolizes the.
That's interesting for people to know that though, because people think if they're having something natural, then it's not actually causing any damage.
What is relevant is how quickly it gets released into your bloodstream. So there is something like it. But honey and sugar, like table sugar, there's probably not really going to be a huge difference. But
it's about the spike that happens.
If you have something that's complicated like broccoli, and you have exactly the same amount of sugar, so say there's like 3 grams of sugar in that portion of broccoli, and then you have 3 grams of sugar, like half a teaspoon of sugar, the half teaspoon of sugar is going to spike your sugar straight away. With the broccoli is actually going to take time. So
that's mitigated by the fiber.
The fiber slows it down and all that sort of stuff. So that is important distinction. But at the end of the day, if the sugar's hitting your bloodstream, it doesn't really matter, because it's now a molecule. It doesn't matter whether, if you were to take this leather couch and you break it down into its molecules, it doesn't matter whether it was a couch or it was a table or whatever. At the end of the day, it's made of the same stuff, and your body breaks it down to the point that it now just uses molecules. So where it comes from, it doesn't really matter.
And what's that test for the sugar that you just?
It's called the HbA1c, hemoglobin A1c. I can't remember what A1c is.
Yeah.
So that's a fantastic test. So what else do we do? I think that's it. But again, we're looking at risk. Yeah, I said that. It's the risk profile for the stuff that with lifestyle we can make huge changes for. So I don't test for full-blown cardiovascular disease. I'm not a cardiologist. I'm not there to try and fix a person's heart disease. What I'm trying to do is steer a person's lifestyle in the direction that they don't get heart disease in the first place. Because by the time you got heart disease, you're in a situation where you're in real sick care. Now you need a surgeon. Now you need drugs. What I want to try and do is keep people away from drugs, away from surgery. What we want to do. So that's the distinction. So yeah, that's what we do with the wellness score, and it's black and white. What gets measured gets managed. So we just show people what is there.
And also, it's quite motivating when you have that information, because if we come back to informed consent, now you're informed, right? So what do you consent to?
Yeah, and I think with that method as well, it works so much better than like we was giving reference before to the NHS, where that's the point of, oh, I need medication now to fix me. Whereas what you guys are talking about, prevention is better than cure. So
Yeah, I mean, let's save the NHS, right? Let's not put so much stress on them. You know, medicine is really bad with chronic illness. It's really, really good with acute illness, trauma. You know, if I get hit by a car, please take me to A&E. Don't take me to a chiropractor,
100%.
right? You know, but or a wellness provider. You know? Don't take me to a homeopath if I've been like hit on the head with a piano, right? But like if I'm trying to now figure out, okay, how can I get the best out of my body? How can I prevent disease? How can I start to mitigate this sort of chronic illness that I'm sort of struggling with? Now take me to a healthcare provider. There's actually a brilliant analogy where it's you know, when you're in a disease process, like your house is on fire, right? So when your house is on fire, you want the fire department to come there with their hoses and their axes, their drugs and their surgery, right? So this is the sort of medical paradigm. But what you don't want, once the fire's been put out, you don't want the fire department to come with their hoses and axes every single day and carry on dousing. You go, yeah, but you've had a fire, so we're going to make sure that it's never going to have a fire again. So we're just going to throw a whole bunch of water. What you now want is you want your carpenters, you want your decorators, you want your smoke alarms and smoke detectors to be making sure that they're all working. Your wiring's good so that you're not going to get another fire in the house. So that's where the wellness providers come in. So once the fire is out, or before you actually have the fire, you want to have those things in place. You want to make sure that your wiring is good. You want to make sure that your smoke detectors are working well. So that's the sort of like the analogy, the health versus or the healthcare versus sick care, and that's quite a nice analogy to sort of look. And I tell my patients, you don't want the fire department showing up, but if they need to show up, fine, but you should basically then start to change your behavior and change the structure of the system so that you don't need the fire department all the time. You basically start to get into a position where you're actually now just using decorators and carpenters.
Yeah, well, this is why I asked you the question, because I remember when I was going through that time when I mentioned before where Dan was going, you should go and see Grant. I'm going on Tuesday, and I was like, oh, what's wrong? Mm-hmm. That was my initial reaction. Oh, what's wrong? He's like, oh, nothing. I just go regularly. And I'm like, but why? If you're not poorly, if you've not got something wrong, why are you going to see Grant? He's like, oh, just because it's a checkup and he does me an alignment and it sees me through and I feel good.
Yeah.
And it's this preventative thing which people don't understand, and I think it's important we have this conversation, because it doesn't, for me, after going through the process with you guys and now, going through, see you every 2 weeks and going through this process for myself with my hip, but now my ankle and all that stuff for the running. But you don't need to be in pain with a bad shoulder to go and get what you just talked about, the wellness score, because I think everyone should go and do that. And I know it's not accessible for everyone, and I know, I understand that, but I think if we're talking about sick care and healthcare, it's so much better to try and find what's going on now. So even if you can put it off for 10, 15 years with stuff that you can do right now. And it probably is going to cost you a little bit of money in the short term, but you can't put, I know that's so cliche, you can't put a price on health,
but
right?
I think something important to recognize here is at some point your health is going to cost you, either now or later.
Yeah.
And when it costs you now, there's still something you can do about it. When you wait for it to cost you later, it may well be beyond the point of repair. So I think it's important to recognize that where we invest our time, energy and money in is where our values are. Now, it's easy for us to talk about this because we're both healthcare providers, right? So we invest a lot of time, energy and money into our own health, and we expect that from other people because that's our value set. So it's important when you have a client come in to make sure that you're meeting them where they're at in terms of their value set. But often it will be something like, I want to be able to have fun with my grandchildren, okay? That's the value set. Family is the value set. And then bringing it back to health and how health is important in that value set. Because sometimes people just can't see it because they're just not that way inclined. But you're all going to be that way inclined at some point in your life when illness comes for you. But just to come back to the NHS for a moment, is that just diabetes cost the NHS £10 billion last year. Most of which is entirely preventable or reversible. Right, I'm not talking about type 1, but type 2. And younger and younger people are being diagnosed with it. And, I mean, it's just ridiculous because it's literally down to lifestyle.
All
it's
diet.
Absolutely what you put in your face.
Movement.
And movement, yes,
lifestyle.
for sure.
Yeah, okay.
Strength plays a role.
Stress.
And I think that's one chronic illness, right, that I mentioned. £10 billion pounds a year. Can you imagine what we could do with that money if people were better educated, better supported? Now, if somebody comes in and they have no education in this field, couldn't we send them to go and get the education and the support, whatever it is they need to know, how to plan a meal, how to plan a budget so you can afford to eat in a certain way? Surely that must be money better spent than managing the disease, which once you've got it, and it's ongoing, right? That cost isn't going to go down now. It's going to go more and more because the long-term impact of somebody's diabetes and the organ systems that fail and the amputations that have to happen and all these things, that cost more and more money. The disability care costs more and more money. It's not like a once-off cost. Whereas if you were to educate and empower people, it's a once-off cost. Now they're educated and empowered and they have to make better choices. So it's just such a difficult balance to find. I feel real sympathy for any politicians trying to find a balance between these things, because at the end of the day, if people don't take responsibility, they end up at the National Health Service, don't they, with a chronic illness, which is not what it was designed to cope with.
Yeah,
it's not coping.
No, well, when you think of the numbers, you can almost kind of, that other part of your brain can almost think like it's almost like the perfect business model from a monetary perspective. And I say that because my dad passed away in 2020 from type 2 diabetes. It was a contributing factor. He got COVID. But it was his type 2 diabetes that got him in hospital in the first place. He was on dialysis. Now, my dad originally had type 1 diabetes, but the type 2 diabetes was prevalent because one of the most globally recognised sugary drinks in the world, which is now the second most understood word on the planet, Coca-Cola. He really loved that, and then Mars bars and sugary treats. So when we talk about this thing about being informed, like, even the doctors were telling my dad at the time, like, not to really eat these foods or go by these foods. But there's a trick that happens, obviously, in the brain with the dopamine hit from sugar. And every time you go in supermarkets, petrol stations, whether it's Marks and Spencer's, Asda, Tesco, it doesn't matter who it is, every time you get near the till area, there's always these tempting sweets and treats. And we have Easter, where all the chocolate eggs are about. So it's almost like there's a lot of people out there who probably have the drive in their heads and the thought process to, I want to go down the health route, but there's these corporations and sugary treats and things that are pushed on people, which sometimes you can pick them up, and I've done it myself. I've walked out with 2-3 bags of Haribo. I've not wanted them.
I've found loads of secret sweets at mine when you stay at mine. I'm always finding wrappers in the drawer.
Yeah. So what I would say is it is
bad
there.
As well. I understand it.
And now when we see the birth of things like Deliveroo, Uber Eats, people are working longer hours, the temptation there for poor health is on the rise, which is why we're now having these issues. Like, we've got obesity levels now that are the biggest they've ever been.
And they're growing.
As young as 6 years of age, or even less, I think now.
Mental.
So the reason I'm mentioning that to you guys now, I'd be really interested to know, with your learned experience through your clients, and with the fact that in the UK, another thing that's on the rise and has continued to be on the rise in recent years is mental health.
Huge.
And I see a correlation through my own experience of my own journey with food. And like you said, the petrol goes into the Ferrari. You're only going to use Shell Optimax, which is what my friends do with them kinds of cars. They don't put Tesco petrol in it. Now that I give my body the right kind of nutrients, that's had a massive impact on my mental health. So how much would you say food and the quality of food that you give reference to before, Grant, not diet, but also the portion size, the quality, the manner in which you source your produce, how much would you say that plays a role in combating mental health?
It's massive. The gut-brain connection is unequivocally linked. So, you put garbage into your gut, it definitely has a huge effect on your serotonin levels. I mean, I think actually Elrina's probably even better at answering this one than I am.
So I'm quite lucky because my sister's a psychologist, so I get to see as well firsthand the impact that poor health has on people's mental health. Because we've got to remember, you don't get to go anywhere else to have a bad mood. You live here. This is one place. Now, if anybody's ever been hangry, you'll know what I'm talking about, right? And that's just a blood glucose drop, and you could just take somebody's head right off, right? Which my husband experienced firsthand today until he fed me some lunch. But I think we've got to understand 80% of your serotonin is made in your gut. If your gut is dysfunctional, you will have a mental health issue. if just from that one hormone, and there's loads of different things at play here.
And serotonin is your feel-good hormone.
That's your happy
That makes you
hormone,
feel good,
right?
Yeah.
So you've got to start thinking, then you start chasing other things that make you feel good, whether it be the dopamine or, those little glucose spikes that give you that little lift and a, feeling. And you start chasing that. But because there's a crash afterwards, you keep having to chase it. So that's one part of the kind of mental health thing. I think also we don't move enough. If anybody's ever been outside doing something active, it's very difficult to feel miserable after a workout. And the motto that myself and my one girlfriend have, we ride together, is you never regret a ride. You never regret a workout. You might be miserable when you arrive. They come at my house at 7:15 in the morning or 6:15 in the summer, and they're both like, oh, I don't want to be here. And by the end of the workout, we're chatting and laughing. One, there's community, but two, it's the exercise itself is hugely impactful on your mental health. So it's not just diet, it's movement as well. It's community that has an impact on loneliness is hugely on the rise. And we can see that loneliness literally kills people. And we see this from studies in babies in ICU that don't get touched enough. So this is a study that goes back some years now. Babies that just didn't get touched wouldn't thrive. So they had all the nutrients they needed. They had all the water, fuel, everything, but no community, no touch. So that is important if we just recognize how important it is for elderly people and now even more young people that get so isolated post-COVID. They just didn't build communities the way they would have done. People are working from home and they just don't have community. So how do you make friends? How do you build a community? So there's lots of factors to play with mental health, and all of it happens here. There's one place. So it's a hormonal, it's a chemical thing, feeling bad, sad, mad. It's so if you were to sit there, I want you to think a really stressful thought, really stressful. You miss your flight on Saturday morning. What will happen is every cell in your body will respond to that thought. Your heart rate will go up, your blood pressure will go up slightly, your mouth will go dry. And we like to think that you can go and have your feelings somewhere else, but you can't. They're happening in every single cell in your body. So stress in and of itself has an impact on how healthy your body is. And how healthy your body is directly related to how you respond to stress and where your mental health is. You can't separate the two. That came with the Greeks way back when they started, making things into a more dualistic system, separating this from that. It just doesn't work that way. And now we talk about holism, and I've always laughed about it, even as a young kid. What does it mean? How can you be, a body without a soul is a dead thing.
Yeah.
And have you ever seen a soul without a body? These things can't be separated, but we like to study things in bits. You walk into a hospital and there'll be gynecology, urology, gastroenterology, and I'm like, those things all in the same person, right? You don't get to kind of, but if you want to study something, it's the only way to really do it and specialize. But we've got to recognize that the body hasn't read any of those textbooks. The body is only one place to operate, all of it, whether it's mental, physical health. I don't see how we can separate it, because I've yet to meet people who have really poor mental health that are physically really healthy, and vice versa.
Yeah.
The things are interlinked.
We talk about community as well. Is it Ikigai where they talk about that place in
Sense of purpose.
Japan?
Yeah.
Sense of purpose.
Okinawa.
And this is a place where people live the longest, so they have the blue zones where community is super strong. Everyone has a purpose, whether it's bringing milk to the other people who are old or whatever it is, helping someone do the shopping. They've got a purpose within that community, within that village, and that gives people longevity. Talking about community, though, I wanted to actually touch upon something which you brought up at dinner the other night at ours. You were talking, or you brought up the fact that you guys are doing the retreats. You were explaining the retreats, and me and Eleanor were like, "Well, that sounds awesome." So I wanted to have a chat about that, and maybe just we could talk about what the retreats are, what the purpose is, what you're trying to achieve. Because again, when you mention community, that is also part of that, right? The community aspect is really strong, and what you were explaining to me, Eleanor. So just tell us a little bit, and because Pete doesn't know, what are the retreats, what you're trying to do with the retreats.
Okay, so I think the first thing, that there's a lot of retreats, and there's actually a real movement for people to use more and more retreats, and I think people are getting younger and younger and younger and using them. So I think they are fantastic. what Elrina and I are just talking about and looking at stuff, there actually isn't a huge amount out there. I think we're starting to become, there's a couple of popping up now that are actually really sort of medically health-based retreats. So you can go and have a yoga retreat, and you can have a breathwork retreat, and you can have a nutritional retreat and a detox and everything that you can think of. But in terms of like actually doing some, okay, so how can we move your health in the right direction and do like a deep dive? There's not a lot around about that. So again, we start off with the wellness score. So we do the blood test, we do the movement analysis, we do the nerve scans, we do the posture photo, and then we do the interview in terms of like, okay, what do you want out of this? Okay, so that's step one. That's pre-retreat. So we do some analysis, and then what we'll do is we take a group of people, small group of people, to a beautiful location, chef that sort of lays on all the food that they should be eating, and so they can start to recognize this can be delicious and it is nutritious and all that sort of stuff. And we take them through exercise, the type of exercise that you should be doing in terms of like, a good quality stretching and strengthening routine and cardiovascular stress, breath work, so all of that sort of physical stuff. And then what Elrina and I are going to do on these retreats is do a lot of education as well. So we will look at the pillars of health, and look at the main, what they call the 4 horsemen of disease that really makes us chronically ill, and it ultimately is the death of most of us. And
What are those 4 pillars?
so it's the 5 pillars.
5 pillars.
When you talk about the 4 horsemen of...
Sorry,
Four
four
horsemen.
horsemen. Sorry, yeah. What are
So
those?
the 4 horsemen are it's like degenerative, so cognitive degenerative diseases. So Alzheimer's is the biggest one. Okay, then you got cardiovascular disease, you got cancers, and you got type 2 diabetes.
Okay,
so those are the 4 things that pretty much take us all out. And then obviously there's trauma and things like that. But as far as the illnesses that most people die of, it's those, and almost nobody dies.
That I think that we can influence and avoid.
Okay,
That's probably the key thing.
which you preventative.
You can prevent.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, the
Because you all want to die, but
lifestyle
you want to die as late as possible,
Yeah,
as healthy
yeah, of
as
course.
possible, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got the 5 pillars of lifestyle medicine. So your quality of your sleep, reducing your toxins, relationships, coming into community again, nutrition and activity. So making sure, because we know there's loads of studies here on strength and longevity, relationships, community and longevity, sleep, and the importance of that in terms of modulating how your brain cleans itself in the night for neurodegenerative stuff, as well as everything else. But what a lot of people don't recognize about sleep is that you can only survive about 10 days without sleep, and yet we don't look after our sleep, So, but those are your 5 pillars and your 4 horsemen. So that will be our focus. If that kind of workshops will be done throughout the weekend.
Is it a weekend retreat?
Yeah, it will be
a long
4
weekend.
day, 3 day, three nights, kind of 4 days. I
Okay.
reckon. With workouts that will also be tailored to each person. So a lot of people that we see come in with injury. So you want to be able to stay active despite that injury, or work around the injury, so you can still get a good cardiovascular workout, a good strength workout. Without having to limit yourself too much. Breath work, obviously brilliant for mental health, relaxation, better sleep quality, and so on. Mindfulness, walking. And again, breath work, coming back to how long can you live without air? About 3 minutes for most people.
Yeah.
Some person somewhere's done like 23 minutes, I read the other day.
But the brain can only last 3
But
months
the brain
without
can-
oxygen.
Yeah. So just learning how important that is for stress management, for oxygenation of your body, just for every single cell to work in its optimal way. Good breath work is so important. Most of us breathe poorly because our posture's poor. Working on people's posture, so that helps your mood as well. There's a huge influence between posture and mood. If you're down like this. I remember reading a Charlie Brown comic once, and he was like, I'm depressed. He says, no, but if you're depressed, you have to have the depressed posture. And he shows your shoulder have to have, your head has to be down. And you look at most people today and you go, you have the depressed posture, and then you...
Yeah, you do.
On the tube,
you sat and
eating fast foods and sat in offices. If we think about the position that we sit like this in offices for
But there's
hundreds of
links,
thousands of years, that
you
was
don't
an
see
alien
working
posture,
like
weren't it?
Yeah.
But yet, if you were to adopt for me the pose of somebody winning the 100 meters Olympic, what is the pose every single nation in the world will do when they see that?
Well, it's like this.
Yeah.
Arms overhead.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that lowers your
Fists
stress
and stuff.
levels.
Yeah, that's what I
it
do when I leave
increases
your
oxytocin
gaff.
and
Every time I'm
serotonin.
going to have a conversation with you guys, I'll go out and I'll call in, I'll go, Eleanor, you've never guessed what just happened. I'm not even joking. It's to be serious. Sorry, Elrina, carry on.
No, but it's true.
Yeah.
I think it's every nation across the world. You watch a football game, a rugby game, and you see a celebration. Every single nation does the same thing, arms up and out.
Yeah.
But yet we don't always link that's the chemistry changing the posture, but the posture changes the chemistry as well.
Yeah.
Totally.
And if you want to hack your biochemistry, changing your posture is hugely powerful. So that's something that we'll address at the retreats as well. But the most important thing, all of this knowledge is out there. People can go look it up and so on. It's how does it apply to you? Why does it apply to you? How can you make this happen? Why is it important to you? So doing that goal setting for people where they can sit and work through their values. Why is this valuable to me? And then make those decisions. And then having some support as well and accountability in 3 months' time. How are you doing with those goals you set in 6 months' time? And seeing progress, doing another health score. Are those numbers looking better?
Yeah.
Are the things you hoped you were going to do going in the right direction? If not, why not? Where the wheels fallen off? And if you think of an MOT for your car, you go every year, they make recommendations, you make little changes, you change your tires, whatever it is you do. But we do these things every year, we understand. You go to your dentist every year, check your teeth, have them cleaned. What are the recommendations? Floss. Oh, I've forgotten to floss the last few months. Okay, I'll get back on it. Yeah. It's those little reminders. And as you were saying with Dan, why is he still coming in? It's the little reminders, the accountability.
Yeah.
I go see a physio myself, and not because I don't know which exercises to. It's so somebody checks that I'm doing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that accountability is absolutely invaluable. So that's part of what we like to offer for people as well.
So you've got the before part, which is the wellness.
During.
Then you've got the retreat, which is the 3 nights, 4 days.
Yeah.
And then you've also got the aftercare, essentially.
Yeah.
To make sure that people are also implementing all the knowledge, again, applied knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And have you got one coming up? Like, when's the next one?
Next one is in
May.
the second week of May. So it's the
9th to the
11th
11th
of May in Wiltshire.
And
9th to the 12th.
Easy to get, 9th to 12th.
And if someone wants to look at how to jump on or some more information, how do they find out about it?
So the best thing is to have a look at our website, which is Health Span Wellness Retreats, or just .com.
Yeah.
All the information's on there. Link to contact us over there, but it's just hello at Healthspan Wellness Retreats is the email that'll go to both of us, or it can be Elrina at or Grant at healthspanwellnessretreats.com. So that's how you can get hold of us, and that's it.
And some cold water therapy if you're interested.
Of course,
love it.
For the dopamine addicts.
So hot, and
150%
showing people how to do cold water and how to safely do the saunas and that contrast therapy and all that. So it's all there. And the trainers that we use are incredible. The trainer on this particular retreat that we're going to be doing in Wiltshire is Richie Norton. I don't know if you guys have ever come across him, but he's an incredible trainer.
He's trained people like Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, wow. He's like been up on the A-list. So he's a draw card on its own. He's an incredible breathwork guy, and I've never trained with anybody that's better. He's an incredibly intuitive trainer. So really happy to have him.
Well, when you explained this retreat the other day, I was like, this sounds amazing. I can't make that one in me. I remember we were looking at the calendars and we didn't sync up, but I wanted people to know about that because it sounds amazing. And I think even if you don't think, like I said before, if there's something wrong with you haven't got pain, there's no reason why you shouldn't be looking into doing something like this. It sounds incredible. Your retreat sounds awesome. And I will get to one eventually. We're going
to be doing them. The next one, we haven't got a date for it, but we're looking at October. October is going to be quite good, sort of like after school holidays have sort of ended and people have got through September because you sort of like get back into routine. I think October is a good time to sort of dip in. There's a few poignant times during the year that are good to make sort of health decisions. One is the beginning of the year, right? So New Year's resolutions, but that's probably not that great, especially in the Northern Hemisphere because it's dark and rainy and it's quite depressing. So maybe springtime's a really good time. So that's why we were thinking May would be a good time just to boost that.
Sprinkling the whole body.
Sprinkling, get people ready for the summer. Then after summer holidays, you kind of been, probably letting your healthy habits go a little bit, and you're completely out of routine with maybe the kids and being back from university or out of school or whatever. So by September is actually also a good time for people to go, okay, actually I'm going to get back to the gym, I'm going to start eating healthy and all that sort of thing. So those are sort of the main points of, and then obviously straight after Christmas, not during Christmas. That's a bad thing.
Yeah, that's the wrong time.
There's definitely points in the year. So those we'll definitely be looking at a spring and an autumn one, and then scatter things. We also want to do corporate events as well, just because this really speaks to a lot of people's corporate lifestyles as well. So especially. I say especially senior management, but I think everybody's in the same boat now. You're working longer and longer hours, stressed out, especially, and I guess especially senior managers when they're starting to get into midlife, they've actually done quite a lot of. They've invested a lot of time in their career at the detriment of their health a lot of the time.
That makes sense.
So they've actually spent a huge amount of time of energy getting themselves to a certain financial level, but they've actually taken a huge amount of withdrawals out of their health bank account. And then they'll get to a point where they go, hang on a second, actually, do you know what, I'm probably okay, but actually my numbers are starting to go in the wrong direction. Talk about blood tests and maybe doing a Bupa check and whatever these things. So they start to come full circle and they go, hang on a second, I probably need to do something about my health so that I can actually enjoy all this sort of effort I've put in. So I think that's an important time of people trying to make positive changes, and that's where things can be sustainable in terms of, taking all this information that's out there and actually making it an actionable, applicable sort of, action point. So
yeah, these guys in the retreat haven't got a clue what they've got coming to them. It's good. I'm very envious.
I love the retreat. When you showed me the website earlier, what I really like about what you guys are doing is obviously what we was touching about before in terms of the UK at large, in terms of the numbers that are increasing when it comes to diet, mental health, and this informed, like you said, consent before, which I really like. But when I was looking at your retreat, I just got this sense of like, your hands being held and it's compassionate accountability. So it's kind of like, we're going to guide you, but we're going to give you the tools that you can go out and make them changes. And I know that when I've done retreats in the past, that's the information that you get, you take away with you. And just going back on your corporate point, my business that I used to run with my business partners in Manchester, we had like 550 staff. Wow. It was super enjoyable, but it was super stressful and it took a lot of time in my life. When my diet wasn't right, or when my physical health wasn't being maintained, and like you said, that balance wasn't right, my performance in my working environment was really struggling. When I was able to match my dietary requirements along with my physical requirements and take care of myself and take that time out, it's, in a weird way, my brain was going, oh, you shouldn't be taking that time away from work. But then when I was going back in, my performance levels were increasing and improving because this was all functioning better. So
you were sharpening the saw, the whole 7 habits, as Stephen Covey's stuff. It's you don't want to hack away at with the blunt instruments. So by doing that stuff, you are sharpening the saw. So it's an investment, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that and I sort of alluded to this earlier, that health is like a bank account, right? So you've got to be putting in more deposits than you are taking withdrawals. And you can take withdrawals. You can go on holiday and you can enjoy yourself there, but you've got to be putting in more into your health than you are taking out. If you start to get overdrawn, if you stay overdrawn, you will have a crisis. And that's what we're trying to look at, is just making sure that you've got a positive balance. And you don't have to be a monk. You don't have to be, absolute guru in terms of health, but you do make sure that you've got that positive balance. And that's sort of what we're trying to teach. And
I think there comes a point where I can see it so clearly with clients coming at the same age, analog age, whatever you'd call that, like they're both 60, chronological, thank you. But actually biologically you can start seeing those gaps, and what you can see is one person is either drawing dividends from that positive bank account or one person is paying interest on an overdraft, and you can see it. And by the time people are 60, 65, 70, 75, you wouldn't believe they were the same age coming in. It's really interesting to see that, because over the last 17 years, I've been in the same clinic. So some of my clients I've known them for 17 years. Wow. And I can see the difference in those who have made those deposits and those who've been making more withdrawals and deposits. But to come to your point that you were talking about earlier with your company and, something one of my co-tutors mentioned a while ago, and we were talking about retraining mums, right, postnatally. This is particularly what I was teaching. And she talked about load and capacity. And I thought to take it to any of us, if you've got a particular load on any particular day, you've got to make sure you've got capacity to cope with that. And where does capacity come from? A good night's sleep, good nutrition, good relationships, all of these things, that gives you the capacity to cope with a load. What we've got to be careful of is that we don't think we can take the same load today that we did yesterday. I'm going to go train this hard, I'm going to do my cold water therapy, I'm going to work 12 hours, I'm going to do, a podcast in London and so on. But the capacity has changed because you'd had a poor night's sleep, your nutrition wasn't on point, you've had a fight with your partner and so on. Something has got to give over here. You can't keep loading that scale when the capacity doesn't balance it out. But the capacity is the stuff that sometimes we have control over to a large degree, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just have a bad night's sleep for no good reason, right? It happens. No, mostly for me because I've done something wrong, but I'm sure it happens. But just make sure then don't put that same load on yourself the next day. Offload what you can so that you don't end up with injury or illness in some way because you haven't actually balanced those two things out.
Burnout is real, right?
Yeah.
I've been there myself with burnout and in denial about it as well. This almost like, I would call it like you could kind of say it was kind of like grind culture at one point 10 years ago, where there was a lot of people, and I think Eric Thomas is this great motivational speaker, and he's like, I was homeless, I was eating out of trash cans, you got to go and work out. And we used to talk about this in our company, and I used to live and breathe it and be this positive Pete and really drive and grind, and it's all good on the surface, but mentally behind the curtain I was really, really struggling, and burnout was a real big thing for me. And it's only when I realised that and admitted to myself, listen, this is out of balance. I started getting dark rings around my eyes. My wife was telling me, you were doing too much, and I was like being ignorant, saying, no, I'm not doing enough. This, that, me and Jacky talked about this recently.
Man up.
Man up, sleep when you're dead.
Yeah.
But I tell you, you guys run about pillars before, and for me, sometimes people will ask me like, what is it that fuels your kind of healthy regime and what you're doing? It'll range from weights in the gym to cycling on my bike around the island to hiking, where I get into that meditative state. But the biggest thing for me since I turned 45 in January, one of the biggest things for me these days is sleep. I can't believe how important it is. And years ago, I just used to brush it off, and I'm lucky because I've always kind of been a good sleeper, but I've found now that when I really invest in my sleep, and the things like a dark room with the temperature being right, making sure there's fresh bedding, all them little elements, maybe a bit of lavender scent on the side, when you really put that effort in and you create that kind of environment and the intention that I'm gonna have a good sleep. I never did all this before. It was just like, go to bed, throw the cover over, and that's it.
Hope for the best.
The output now,
on the screen and then
the screens are terrible, but my mental capacity now to be in a better realm just from sleep alone gives me so much. But equally, if I have bad sleep, I can really feel it mentally as I'm getting older. So
again, going back to the bank account, right? So some people are born with a trust fund and some people are born with an overdraft. It's just the way the cookie crumbles, right? You don't know if you're going to get the Skoda or the Ferrari, right? You don't get to choose that. But I suppose, you'd much rather have something that was well maintained. So you might have been born with an overdraft, made loads of deposits, and you end up with a positive balance. But, you might be closer to that side of things because you've had to work so much harder to get to a positive balance than somebody who was born with a trust fund. You're always going to hear these stories of my grandfather was 90 years old and he smoked every day and drank a bottle of whiskey. You always hear these stories. These are anomalies. And also, if you look carefully at those people's lifestyles, they had good community. They were probably eating really well. They would be really strong because they were doing physical work. So there are other mitigating deposits they were making into that bank account that you didn't see, even though they were making these massive withdrawals. But they were probably born genetically with some really great trust fund sitting there for them. So, if you're lucky enough to have the trust fund, have at it, right? Make a withdrawal. But most of us aren't, and we can see that in how our health scores globally are dropping. People are so unhealthy, and younger diagnosed, as I said, with diabetes, cancers, and so on, are being diagnosed much younger. So, not all of us have that lovely trust fund.
Yes, look at the draw of that. Book.
Yes.
Got it there?
We have it ready.
Right, so we do a feature on the show called Pass the Book. Bit of a spin on the actual term, but the previous guest leaves the next guest a book, not knowing who the guest is. So the previous guest was Abby Flynn, who's an amazing vocalist, artist. just human being. Incredible, wasn't she? And she said she's left the book, The Power of Now. And the reason is, she said, this book helped me get in touch with the me beyond all the identities and constructs I had made. It brought me profound peace and presence and gave me the ability to navigate some pretty impossible life challenges. Well, cancer being one of them.
Overcome it.
Overcome cancer and find my center and truth beneath all the noise. Wow. So that's for you.
You've
from
probably
Abby.
read it.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
You may have read it, you may have not, but that's
Yeah, I
from
read
Abby.
that 23 years ago, actually.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's from Abby.
Amazing.
But before we wrap up, guys, I want to say thank you so much for coming down. It's been really nice to talk to you. It has just felt like a normal conversation. Just felt like having dinner hours without some scran in front of us. But is there anything else you want to mention and talk about? You know, that we talked about the retreats. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we wrap up? Or we cover everything?
I think we covered everything. I suppose, yeah, what we want to do is for people who can't come to the retreat, do wellness days. You know, so if you can't come to a whole day, we'll do days on those 5 pillars and possibly on the 4 horsemen, just for education and so on. So people can come in. If you've particularly got an issue with sleep, we'll do days on sleep or days on nutrition, days on activity and so on. So we're getting those in the diary as well. So it'll be little day retreats or even half-day retreats, depending on how much, you know, there is to cover.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So those will go up on the website as soon as we've got the dates in. And then companies who want to get in touch, who'd like this kind of coaching for their staff, that would be brilliant as well. Just to get, I suppose, I don't like the word productive. I love the word fruitful. You don't expect an apple tree to have apples in the middle of spring. So the same with your staff, making sure you're nurturing them so that when it comes time for them to bear fruit, they do. But we're not machines. We don't just work this at the same pace and tempo all the time. And that's particularly true for women because of our hormone fluctuations and so on, understanding that different times of life, there's different fruitfulness, but men are the same. We all have a different cycle. Some people work better in the morning, afternoon, or whatever. So just understanding that and getting companies to understand that about their staff and how to support them to get the best out of them in terms of fruitfulness rather than productivity.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
Great.
And the website's Health Span Retreats, is it? I
Yes.
think?
Healthspanretreats.com.
.com, yeah.
Health
We'll
Span
put a
Wellness
link in the
Health,
description.
Healthspan Wellness Retreats.
Wellness Retreats.
Healthspan wellnessretreats.com.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I've got it on my phone.
I've got it here.
I was on it.
Healthspanwellnessretreats.com.
Can
I'm
you tell
right
it's been a bit of a long
again.
day? She's always right. I don't know why I even looked at it.
Guys,
like
it's
that.
late.
Healthspan
Yeah.
Wellness.
This is late for us, guys. It's 20 past 8.
We
This
need
is
a
well late.
Tenzing.
We should be in bed in half an hour.
Yeah.
I know.
Just
But guys,
about.
thank you so much for coming down.
Oh, thanks for
you.
having us.
Wicked.
Wow, that conversation could have gone for hours. In fact, we might have to do it again.
100%. Well,
Definitely.
I'll tell you what we'll
Yeah,
do.
happy.
There's so much in there.
Well, after the retreat, we'll get them back and we can talk about the retreat next time.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah?
That'd be awesome.
Perfect.
All right, let's do it.
Sounds amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.